The Baltimore Ravens offense fell apart in 2021. It was a unit built to run the ball, and then it lost all of its running backs, its star left tackle, and different offensive linemen throughout the year. Lamar Jackson himself was banged up at different times as well. Since the Ravens don't have dynamic wide receivers or a tight end past Mark Andrews who can consistently catch the ball, they couldn't adapt to play with a different identity or style. The Ravens are built to run the ball, but Lamar Jackson is one of the best pocket passers in the NFL. Even while the offense around him struggled last season, Jackson continued to excel in difficult circumstances. On this first play against the Los Angeles Chargers, the defense has widened its base alignment so that one of their outside linebackers is covering the slot. Jackson expects the 3-down lineman to come forward at the snap, but he needs to figure out which of the 2 outside linebackers will come with them. If one comes, it's a standard 4-man rush and he has to set his timing off of that. If neither come, it's a 3-man rush and Jackson knows that will change the coverage on the back end, so he'll probably have to hold the ball. If both edge rushers come, then it's a blitz and he'll have to react accordingly. The ball will likely have to come out quickly. Ultimately, the left side linebacker drops and the slot linebacker comes. It's a 4-man rush with quarters coverage in behind. All of the defenders are dropping into zones. Jackson's eyes go straight to the rusher to confirm the pass rush. He then hits the top of his drop and turns his eyes to his running back in the flat. That running back is running his route behind the streak downfield from the receiver outside. Jackson is purposely encouraging the underneath defender to come forward to the flat. This creates the space for his tight end to run into behind. You can see his actions in the pocket more clearly from the end zone angle. The quarterback's feet match his eyes as they point to the flat before resetting to locate his tight end in behind the defense. He can throw through the window between the 2 defenders because of his technically precise actions before throwing the ball inside the pocket. It's a simple 21-yard gain, or rather a 21-yard gain that looks simple because of the quarterback's intelligence and execution before throwing the ball. For this play against the Colts, we see a common predicament that the Ravens offense created for Jackson last year. He hits the top of his drop and looks to his left for his receivers, but whether through poor route design or poor route running, 2 of his receivers are on top of each other despite it being late in the play. This is fine in a game of 7-on-7 or for quarterbacks who play behind the best offensive lines in the league, but that's not the case for Jackson. He has both edge rushers turning the corner to penetrate the pocket. He can't stand still and wait for his receivers to come open whenever he wants. When he steps up in the pocket, he turns his eyes to the backside of the play. There is a high-low concept working there with a curl route underneath and skinny post in behind it. Jackson trains his eyes on the underneath route and both defenders in the area come forward to cover him. He uses their movement to throw the pass that receiver and hit the window in behind for his outside receiver for a bigger gain. It's a well-thrown ball from Marquise Brown to gain 20 yards. Again, it looks fairly easy for the wide receiver, but not for the quarterback. Being that he's a black quarterback, the default assumption for most onlookers is that Jackson is a one-read quarterback. Not only does he comfortably switch to the backside of plays when necessary, but he also shows off great rhythm and decision making when going through sideline to sideline progressions, one receiver at a time. This play against the Raiders comes from week 1 last year. Jackson has the field spread on the wide side to the left and he executes a play fake in the backfield before looking to the middle of the field. Mark Andrews is running down the middle of the field and has a step on the defender running underneath him, but a cornerback covering over the top turns Jackson away. He comes to the left stop where he has a receiver running a deep curl route. That route is taken away by a defender undercutting the receiver. In the same line of vision, Jackson can see his deep sideline receiver drawing a safety. He has 2 defenders covering him, so there's no opening to try and fit the ball in, even if he gets a step on the first one. Jackson knows he has some time, so he pump fakes before looking to the left flat. As we'll see in the broadcast angle, the timing of Jackson's progression read is perfect. He let the play fully develop so when his running back catches the ball, the defenders are all far away. It's a short throw, but it leads to a 21-yard gain. There are forced checkdowns, bad checkdowns, and there are smart checkdowns, good checkdowns. This is a smart checkdown that gives the offense the most yards it could have possibly gained. No other receiver was a viable option and the back was uncovered. Their pass progression reads, the best pocket passes are able to create windows by manipulating defenders with their eyes. The Detroit Lions send 4 pass rushers after Jackson here. The pass rush is picked up initially and the Ravens again use a route concept where 2 receivers are tight to each other late in the play. But this time it's an effective concept. Jackson uses the 2 receivers coming together to uncover his outbreaking route. But before we see the throw, we must note that Jackson can't fully step into it because of the frontside pressure. He seamlessly adjusts his throwing motion and his feet to get the ball out on time. It carries slightly to the back of the end zone, but it's still a good throw for the touchdown. It's an accurate ball. Against the Colts, we see a more overt example of Jackson manipulating a defender in coverage. This time it's Darius Leonard, one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL. Jackson settles at the top of his drop and looks for Marquise Brown's slant route. Brown gets behind Leonard so the linebacker turns to go back infield. Jackson encourages him further infield with a pump fake in his body shape. He then quickly reloads and puts the ball to the outside, away from the covering safety who was arriving from a deeper position. It's a perfectly placed and perfectly timed throw. On this play, Jackson faces another 4-man rush and hits a deeper drop. The Ravens have a slow developing route concept with the tight end in the right slot and the 2 receivers on the left side of the field running deep. The curl route at the top of the field isn't open because the cornerback never turns upfield. Jackson is forced off his spot by the edge rusher on his left side. He senses that pressure and resets into the pocket where he's at the mercy of the interior pass rush. That movement in the pocket afforded enough time for his receivers to clear the coverage by running deep downfield and for Andrews to track all the way to the sideline on the opposite side of the field. We can see how precise the timing of the throw needed to be for Jackson to hit Andrews before the underneath defender could recover or Andrews' route carried too far over the sideline. It's a perfect throw that accentuates the poise he showed off in the pocket to set it up. Although he's famous for his speed and elusiveness in the open field, Jackson doesn't default to scrambling. He only looks to run when it's the best option. Jackson will read his progressions while setting and resetting within the pocket to strain the coverage as much as possible before scrambling as a last resort. This play in the red zone captures this perfectly as he resets in the pocket 5 times until Andrews eventually finds space in the end zone over the middle of the field. The threat of Jackson scrambling slows the pass rush and helps him to stress the defense as much as possible. But most quarterbacks with Jackson's athletic ability will look to scramble earlier than he does, and most quarterbacks without Jackson's athletic ability will panic and move themselves into a sack or force a throw prematurely in the same scenario. It's the great quarterbacks who have that understanding of the sport and the poise to execute it. Going back to the Lions game, we see Jackson make a similar throw to Andrews on a crossing route again, but this time we see how Jackson uses a subtle reset within the pocket to do 3 things at once. Firstly, the reset creates leverage for his left tackle and neutralises the incoming pass rush on his blind side. Secondly, he buys time for Andrews to get across the field and for the underneath coverage to be pulled forward, which clears space for him to run into. And thirdly, he changes the angle of the throw so the deep safety to that side of the field is no longer a factor at the catch point. If Jackson lined up and threw the ball straight away, the safety could have read him and followed the ball. You can see that Jackson's eyes and feet are lining up to the safety as he releases the ball across his body. The safety doesn't react to Andrews until the ball is already in motion because of how Jackson's posture deceived him. Understanding coverages gives a quarterback an inherent sense of calm. It means that when they get time in the pocket, they can pick the coverage apart. When they don't get time in the pocket, they have a process through which they can react quickly. On this play, Max Crosby comes around the right edge in a hurry so that Jackson is forced off his spot as soon as he hits the top of his drop. Jackson reacts to the pressure at the perfect time, never letting Crosby get too close to him, but not overreacting too early. He then stays within the confines of the pocket despite having space outside because he knows he can hit his drag route over the middle. Sammy Watkins catches that ball short, but he's able to catch it in stride and turn upfield for a 29-yard gain. When we jump to the next play, we can see the intersection of Jackson's intelligence and athleticism. His pocket is rapidly closing from 3 separate points when Jackson hits the top of his drop. Instead of panicking, he takes a deliberate step forward into the middle of the pocket to redirect the edge rushers. Then he reverses that action so his offensive tackles regain leverage. The defenders still get through, forcing their way to the quarterback, which forces Jackson to break the pocket. His receiver is open at the back of the end zone from the very start, and he stays open for a long time, but Jackson waits until there is a passing lane through which he can throw the ball safely. This makes it a safe touchdown pass despite the pressure and despite him throwing the ball on the move from outside the pocket. It all stems from his ability to adjust within the collapsing pocket initially. Sticking with the Raiders game, this time we can see Jackson make a completely different type of play in the pocket. This time he stands in while manipulating the deep safety to the left seam before delivering a perfect deep ball down the right side to Watkins again. Jackson had to let the ball go with a defender in his face. Jackson didn't flinch or overreact to the presence of the defender splitting the 2 linemen in front of him. Instead, he kept his eyes on his receiver and focused on delivering the ball with perfect mechanics. Blitzing Jackson is a dangerous undertaking. His speed and elusiveness allow him to take advantage of space if the pass rush is imbalanced, if they leave a gap. But more often than not, he'll beat your blitz by passing the ball. On this occasion, the Colts sent Darius Leonard from the slot to attack the pocket. Jackson sees it immediately and looks for his slant into the space behind the blitz. It's the right choice, but Leonard sees the ball coming out quickly, so he reverses to get into the passing lane. Jackson understands this and throws the ball around the linebacker for the uncontested catch. It's a very smart throw. Against the Chiefs, the defense goes to a cover 0. That means there's no safety deep and everyone is blitzing who isn't covering a man in coverage. That's an incredibly dangerous play call against Jackson, but not against the Ravens receivers. Only Mark Andrews was likely to win one-on-one every play, so they could easily shut down the wide receiver core as a whole. Jackson looks to Andrews instantly against the blitz, but his tight end stumbles out of his break and is on the ground when he wants to throw the ball to him. He's forced to improvise by looking to his curl route on the right side. That curl route perfectly meshes with the receiver running deep in behind it. Jackson trains his eyes on the curl route before throwing the ball past that receiver to the deeper Marquise Brown who's left uncovered. Both defenders were tempted by this curl route because of Jackson's eyes, and because they were playing behind the blitz they knew the ball had to come out quickly. It's the easiest touchdown of Brown's career off the back of one of the most difficult plays that a quarterback can make from Jackson. A popular knock on Jackson is he's not a true drop-back passer because he needs the threat of the running game. Yet when defenses disguise coverage and blitz him, he picks them apart with his brain more than his legs. The Colts initially show 6 pass rushers on display. The slot defender at the top of the screen is also suggesting he could come forward. When Jackson catches the snap, there are 6 defenders coming, but Leonard has dropped out of the middle and the slot defender is coming from the edge. It's a different type of 6-man rush to what he expected. When Jackson hits the top of his drop, 2 more defenders have dropped from the middle into coverage, so now it's a 4-man rush. It's not even a blitz anymore. In less than a second, Jackson has to mentally adjust his process and execute accordingly. He knows he needs to buy a second of time in the pocket, but the edge rusher is coming, so he steps up in the pocket before hitting his receiver over the middle behind one of the dropping linebackers. Jackson's timing in the pocket with his feet and timing releasing the ball here are perfect. He starts his throwing motion when the receiver is behind the linebacker, so he can't see that he's already open, but he knows he's going to be open based on what the coverage is doing. Doing so prevents the coverage from getting close to the catch point, and again creates an easy catch for his receiver. While beating blitzes with his brain and his precise actions in the pocket, Jackson can also beat crowded coverage with precise passing. He understands the leverage of coverages, knowing which spot he can throw to and which spot to avoid depending on the route against a specific coverage. This play, also against the Colts, shows Jackson push the underneath safety wide with his eyes early in the play before coming to Devin Duvernay on his crossing route. Jackson purposely throws the ball low and inside so that Duvernay is stopped in his route. This prevents him from running into the underneath safety and negates the safety coming down over the top to impact the catch point. Jackson isn't celebrated for his arm strength, but he's capable of consistently hitting spectacular throws. His timing and understanding of coverages set him up to hit windows at a point that maximises the catching opportunity for his receivers. Marquise Brown was his only real deep threat last year, and has been for most of his career. Brown made a lot of plays in Baltimore, but he also left far more plays on the field because of his bad hands or inability to get off coverage. He has a tiny catch radius, which isn't always a problem, but it is a problem when you don't catch the ball consistently. Jackson's numbers were severely curtailed by his whole receiving core, but Brown was particularly bad as the team's first choice wide receiver. This play against the Lions is a very difficult one as Jackson crafts the opening through his progression before hitting his receiver in stride on the backside. This should be a 76-yard touchdown. Instead, it's an incompletion. For this play against the Chargers, Brown has a 22-yard touchdown there for the taking. Jackson throws a perfect deep out route in rhythm, but the veteran receiver can't make the hands catch away from his body. It's not a difficult catch even though the ball is out in front of him a little bit. Going back to the Lions game, Jackson evades a pass rush here before throwing a pinpoint pass moving to his left. He has to clear the underneath defender and not lead the receiver towards the middle of the field where the safety is recovering from. It's not an easy throw at all. Brown could have added a 44-yard touchdown here if his hands weren't so bad. It's especially difficult to take because of how good the play is from Jackson. And this was Jackson's supposed best wide receiver. The Ravens were happy to trade him away without really replacing him this offseason because they recognised that he had become a net negative over time. But unfortunately for Jackson, the Ravens didn't invest in his supporting cast this offseason even after trading Brown away. In the best case scenario, they can be a dominant running offense again where the passing game does just enough for Jackson to put up big overall numbers, similar to his MVP season. But the lack of wide receiver talent and the investments coming on the offensive line mean they're going to be a running team. And that hinges on everyone coming back healthy and staying healthy for the full season. If they suffer similar injuries to last season, they don't have the depth to overcome it. Since Jackson is a black quarterback in the NFL, a successful black quarterback in the NFL, he'll never be widely embraced as a truly exceptional pocket passer that he is. The only slight chance of that happening is if the Ravens change team building philosophy and invest heavily in becoming a true pass-oriented offense. If you gave Jackson just an average receiving core, say the New York Giants group for example, his numbers would be monstrous. It would be incredibly difficult to deny how good of a passer he is. But until that happens, we'll still get the same old narratives that have been dogging him for his whole career.